Alright guys, welcome back. This is tutorial number 7, part 3. We are going through and creating a cooking script. If you're a little bit lost in what we're doing, just go and look back through the previous tutorials in order to catch up with us. Okay, let's go ahead and continue. Alright, so what we were trying to do is draw out our disabled item. So what we need to do is we need to find out what item it is we're actually trying to make. So what does our recipe make? And then from that we can gather the name of the item and then we can display that, and so that's what we're going to do. So in order to do this, we need to, we've got the index, and that index is the item or the recipe number or index of the recipe out of the learned recipe. So let's go ahead and do this. We'll say learned recipes index, and that will tell us what recipe ID it is we're looking for. Okay, so we'll just put RID, and so we need to gather the recipe data again. So we'll just type in recipe data equals, and we'll go through that method again here. And we'll pass it the RID so that it knows what it's supposed to be. Alright, so now we can extrapolate our item ID out of that. Our item ID is going to be the first cell of data within that, which is going to be the first one. And now let's go ahead and get our item. Our item can be brought from data items, and then we just pass it the item ID, and there we have it. So now we've got our item, and now we can come over here and just type in item.name. Okay? So simple as that. We've got our data now, and now all we need to do is go ahead and reset the color back to what it normally is. So we'll just say self.contents.font.color equals fcolor, since we stored it off beforehand, and we're finished with that one. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to repeat that down here. What we're going to do though is we're just going to say self.font.color equals normal color, just in case it was something else, and then we're just going to copy the rest of that text, put it down here, and we don't need to bother resetting the value for that. Okay, so that's it. That should now go ahead and draw all of our recipe data, and the items should be appropriately disabled according to the index of the recipe. And so on. So now that we've got all of that data, let's go and save our project. It's usually probably a good idea to go ahead and store that off someplace, make a quick backup just in case, you know, the worst of anything happens. And so let's go ahead and continue. The next set is our details. Of the details window for our recipes. So we're going to go ahead and say cooking details, and I always like to have the first words always capitalized here, and we're going to make that less than Windows selectable, and let's just go ahead and discuss that a little bit. Why am I using Windows selectable for this? The reason I'm using Windows selectable for this window is because if we take another look at this, it has cook and don't cook down at the bottom. So we need to have those options available to us in order to have those as selectable options inside of the window. So that's why we're making this less than Windows selectable. Okay, so let's go ahead and initialize this window. We're not going to bother passing any values to it again, just like before. And we're going to go ahead and figure out our size. We said last time that our width of our previous window up here was 544 divided by 3, so we need to be at least that far over in our X. We need to be at least 64, since that's what our first window was, the title was 64. And then we are going to make its width be the remaining value. So we're going to put 544 minus 544 divided by 3. You know what? That's not quite right. 544. Let's add one more parentheses here just because, and we're going to multiply that by 2. So that's saying that that is going to be twice that width. I'm really making this far more complex than I need to. Okay, if we minus 1/3 from the total value, we get 2/3. So, sorry, I was doing my math funny. Alright, so we've got our values for our size, and now we're going to refresh our contents. Now, the deal though is that we need to have an item ID passed to us. So we need to have a value or a default selection or something to say, no, I've already got something, or something so that we can say, well, refresh with this item. So as we scroll through our selectable items on the left, we can refresh on the right to show us what that item is, and so on. So this refresh method is going to have an argument on it this time rather than none. Okay, but what we're going to do is we're going to type in recipe, and we are going to set that equal to nil if 1 is not provided to us. That way there we always get a recipe no matter what. Okay, so we're just going to set the recipe equal to the current recipe being passed to us, and then we're going to refresh and do our contents. I guess we could just go and put that there, but I like to put any variables that are coming in, get them assigned out as quickly as possible so that there's no question as far as where they're being assigned. So we'll go ahead and create our window contents, and now let's go ahead and decide here we need to display the name of the item. So we're going to be getting the actual recipe ID. That recipe ID is going to be defined. It's going to come from our scene because that's how we're gonna handle that. So when we change something, it's going to check the current recipe and see whether or not it's equal to the other, and then set it. So what we can do here is, let's see, if this is going to be the recipe ID, we need to gather the item. So we need to get the item ID out of our, let's see, we need to get the recipe data first. Okay, so we're going to set the recipe data, and that is going to be equal to, and we already did that up here, right there. Okay, except this time recipe is our variable for the ID. So we're going to put that right there. So now we've got our data out. And so now let's get our item ID. And that is going to be equal to the recipe data 0. So it's the first cell within it. And now let's go ahead and get our item. Better yet, let's just do it directly. We'll do data items. That, and that is going to equal our item. So rather than breaking it out individually like we did up here in all local variables, you don't have to do that. We could have just done one string of long data in order to get that, but I like to break it out usually so that you can see kind of what's going on. But this time, just for ease of making a little bit less steps in our process, we'll go into it more directly. So we've got our item, so we need to render its name across the top. So we're going to say self.contents.font.size, and we're going to store that off because this here needs to be a larger bolded font. So we're going to say contents.font.size equals, and we'll just use 24. And then here we're going to make it bold equals true. And then now we're going to draw out the first part of text there. So we're going to say self.contents.drawText. We're going to specify the coordinates within the window. We're just going to say 0, 0, and we're going to say its width minus 32, because the width is actually the width of the window, not the width of the contents. So you'd have to do self.contents.width, but it's just easier just to get the width and minus 32. Okay, and then we're just going to use, we'll use 32. We could just type in window line height plus 8. That would also work as well, but not a big deal either way. All right, and so now we're going to put in the item name. All right, and we're going to make that centered rather than left aligned or right aligned this time. Being centered, if we take a quick look, it will be centered across the top here. So we'll do that same thing here with the additional items until we get down to ingredients. It will also be center aligned, I think, all the way through. So we'll just keep everything center aligned. But if you want, of course, you can choose the different alignments. You can go left or right, or I'll just leave it as center. So up to you there. So next we need to figure out how we're going to draw that picture. Okay, so we want to, all we need to do is figure out what, where that picture is stored and figure it out from there. So here we've got the icon. We could possibly use the icon. I don't think it's, I mean, we can use that one, or we can use possibly just a picture out of the folder, out of one of the picture folders or something along those lines if we wanted to. For the purpose of this one, I think we're going to actually do a picture. But I'll show you both methods in case, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so to draw an icon, what we're going to do is we're going to look back at our window base, and we are going to look at our draw methods, and look at that very first one is draw icon. Okay, so from that we need the icon index, X, Y, and whether or not it's enabled, which is just going to determine its opacity level. Okay, so we need to get those pieces of information. So icon index. So let's go ahead and look how others do the draw icon. And here it is just item.iconIndex. Okay, so it's going to be really easy to figure that one out. We can just say self.contents draw text, or not draw text. Actually, we don't even do that. We just say draw icon because it is a method of window base which is greater than window selectable, and which we are less than that, so it will be included in it. Okay, so draw icon, we needed, what order did we need them? Was it XY icon index, and another? It was icon index, XY, and then enabled. So let's go ahead and paste that over here so that it's easier to remember. And so we're going to need to determine whether, we're not going to bother determining whether or not it's enabled, so we're just going to always, because it had enabled equals true, that means that if you don't supply one, then it's always going to default to true. So we're just going to pull that off. So all we need is the icon index. So we just put in item dot, and there we go. We've got the icon index, and now all we need to do is specify the X and the Y as to where that is supposed to be drawn. So our window is this value. Let's just copy that. I'm going to paste that into my calculator here. And it did not like it. We're going to minus 544 divided by 3 is equal to 362. Rounded up, that is 363. And so, just check our time here. So, 363 is our maximum width. So we can go ahead and we can just say, you know what, let's just actually use the method for it. So we'll just say width minus 32 is our contents width, and then we're going to divide that by 2, so it's going to be halfway. It's going to be right smack dab in the center. Okay, but it also needs to be minus the value of the size of the icon, so that it's not just right, it's drawn from the upper left hand corner to, you know, the right of the center. We actually need to offset it a little bit more to the left so that it doesn't end up right on the center line, but because it's drawn from left to right, it ends up on the right side. So we actually need to minus that a little bit more. Icons by default are size 24 pixels, so we're just going to minus an additional 12 in order to set that value. Okay, and then next we need to set our Y value. We already said that our previous line was 32, so we're just going to take that same value, and then we're just going to add a couple more to it so that it's got a little gap. So we'll just give it another 8, so that makes it 40. So we'll just go and put that in there, and that's it. It'll be drawing the icon there now. Okay, so now we need to put in the icon, the description of the item. So let's go ahead and we'll just type in draw item description, item, and we'll let it figure that out. So we'll actually write a method for that later, but I'm just trying to make it a little bit easier so that you can just quickly do that later. And then next we've got our ingredients. Okay, so we're just going to break that out and just say draw ingredients. Hope I spelled that right. And then we're going to pass that the recipe. Actually, we don't need to pass it the recipe number because here we stored it as an instance variable, meaning that it's going to be available. Okay, so in fact, we don't even need to pass this one the description because the item is already known. So we're just going to go ahead and set up those methods here. Item description, and that is going to use the 1, and this is going to draw the ingredients. Oh, I misspelled that. All right, we'll end that. And we'll just go ahead and we'll actually just call that good for now. So we've now defined all of our windows. I haven't finished defining that one, but I think you guys get the general gist of that, so you should be able to finish cleaning that up and finish that part. I'll finish it up here for Van Stone myself later, just so that he can get the full script. But what we're going to do now is we're going to define the scene and put all that data together now so that we can view it, and we'll go from there. Okay, so right now we're at time, so I'm actually just going to log for a second. I'll be back in a few moments and we will put that scene together. So hold tight, guys. I'll be right back.